look, if you're always making a decision based on this fleeting, and again, if we go back to what feelings are, it's a transient, short-term way of being. It's a state, right? It's not a trait. It's not a
Yeah.
characteristic of who we are, right? And so if we can then learn how to define our values, define who we are, when I speak, I always am amazed how many people know the core values for the company that we're they're working for, I'm speaking to, and then I ask, well, what are your core values as an individual? And most people have never outlined that. They've never thought about that. And so if you haven't, then the next part of this equation becomes almost impossible, right? And that is that we want to, instead of making decisions based on those fleeting feelings, we want to make decisions that are aligned with our goals and our values.
Welcome, my guest, Ryan Munsey. He's a sought-after thought leader who specializes in high performance and the development of both individuals and organizations. He is an author, podcaster, speaker, and high-performance consultant. Ryan is an athlete and avid outdoorsman, and he personally coaches Olympic and professional athletes, special force operators, Hollywood celebrities, and leading entrepreneurs and C-level executives while speaking and hosting leadership workshops around the world. He helps them optimize their minds and bodies, win medals, further their careers, and build multiple six-figure businesses. His work has been featured on Fortune magazine, Men's Health, and Men's Fitness. Ryan is also the author of Fuck Your Feelings and the host of the Better Human Project podcast. All right, I want to welcome to the show another amazing guest, Ryan Munsey. Thank you so much for being on Passion, Love, Pursuit podcast. It's so great to connect.
Yeah, it's great to connect, and thanks for having me on, Erica.
Absolutely. I know you're a fellow podcaster as well, which I love talking to fellow podcasters as we were having technical difficulties right before we finally recorded. So it's just, it's a journey, isn't it? This podcasting world, like there's always something, right?
Yeah, there's always something, and so you don't have to when it's another podcaster on the other end, you don't have to try to explain, hey, this doesn't always happen, and this isn't my fault. Like, I totally get it because it happens to me all the time, so no
Yeah.
worries.
Yeah, we have to be a little patient with the technology issues that might arise. But anyways, as I was mentioning to you, I am reading or have read, actually, I got through it luckily, but I'm definitely going to dive deeper in your book, Fuck Your Feelings. Let's say it out loud. Fuck your feelings. So obviously this book definitely stands out. Number one, just by the title in itself. But I know what you talk about in here, you really go deep into why we really need to just fuck our feelings and stop letting it run our lives. I know that very much our emotions run our lives because that is the thing that gets us into action and reacting to things. So I know sometimes we have to put it in the back seat and let our goals and our pursuits kind of take place and take the actions based on what we want to bring into fruition into our lives, opposed to those feelings that are fear and guilt and shame and that thing that keeps on running in the back of our mind, like, oh, I can't do this, so we'll go deep into that. But of course, I want people to know your story, what brings you into the position to talk about this subject and also high performance, which I know you speak a lot about, and really getting people to take ownership of their lives and move them into their goals and what they want to bring into their lives. So what brings you into this position today?
Wow. How far back do we want to go?
Well, I want to hear, how did you become a high performer yourself and to then be able to teach others to do the same?
Okay. Don't tell anybody this, but I'm not positive that I am a high performer myself. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, at what point does one ordain themselves a high performer, right? I don't know. I think, I mean, for me, I grew up playing sports. I wasn't good enough to play in college. I went to Clemson University, and so if anybody is a sports fan, you understand that Clemson is at the top of college athletics, and I wasn't that good. So I filled that competitive void with lifting weights, and really just got into fitness and bodybuilding and nutrition. I wanted to change my major to exercise physiology. Clemson didn't have that. The closest I could get was food science and human nutrition. So I have a dietetics degree. If I wanted to join the system, I would be a registered dietitian. But the classes that we took on the science side of that curriculum did not mesh with what we were being taught in the nutrition classes. Actually, I should say nutrition didn't mesh with the science. And so I didn't want to pay to do an internship to then have to kiss the ring to be a dietitian and kind of toe the party line and say what you have to say in order to keep that title. I also knew that I didn't want to work in a clinical setting. I didn't want to be seeing people after they've had their third heart attack and telling them that they can't eat Big Macs anymore. I wanted to work with people who, like me, were turning over every stone possible to find ways to optimize their performance in any way, whether that was mental, physical, whatever. So that kind of led to the initial obsession and passion for what I would just kind of categorize as human potential and performance. And I'm just a curious person. I'm kind of that guy that just never stopped asking why. I always want to understand the governing dynamics behind a system. So I don't want to be in a position where I have to wait on the next Men's Health to know how to work out, or the next diet plan. I want to know how the body works, and I just learned from an early age that if I figured those things out, that I could plan things or write things myself, whether it was a workout program or a diet. Um, and by doing that, I started working as a personal trainer and nutritionist. And I think it was around 2011, I started having thoughts of, hey, I could do this better on my own. And 2012, I opened my own gym. It was called House of Strength. It was a performance training facility, and started writing for some of the magazines and online websites that folks read, and just kind of snowballed from there. And I guess at that point, just the accumulation of knowledge, and then several years of I hate the phrase in the trenches, but actually getting repetitions, working with people, and helping people make progress, both in the general population and athlete population. And then I had the opportunity to kind of go beyond the gym walls with some podcasting, and I got to meet and work with what I would call high performers, Olympic athletes, professional athletes, special forces operators. At the same time, I was talking to neuroscientists and researchers, and really trying to marry the theory and the application of what is making these people successful. And at the same time, it was kind of towards the back end of the time where I was running the gym, and I was shifting my personal interest away from the X's and O's of programming, and becoming more fascinated by people's ability or inability to stay on the program, to do the things required to achieve the goals that they came in with, whether it was, hey, I want to lose weight and be a healthier person, or I want to get a college scholarship, whatever it might be. And so that's where that interest in why are some people successful and other people aren't really started to foster and grow. And then that kind of led to, we were talking before we hit record that you just came back from the Biohacker Summit in London. I had a chance in May of 2017 to speak at I spoke at the one in Finland and then one in Sweden. And Sweden was May of 17. And I had, I think, 40 or 45 minutes to talk. And at that time, I had spent a lot of time in the biohacking space recently. And my talk that day was more on what you've read in the book about states and traits. And my message to that audience was, hey, I get it. You guys love feeling a certain way, and you're chasing this day and this feeling. But let's zoom out and let's look at the weather versus climate conversation, and let's look at some of these habits that we can put into our lives that don't just make us better today, but can make us better from a trait standpoint, not just that transient state, right? And the talk went really well. And one of the other speakers came up and gave me some encouragement. He was actually writing a book of his own, and was like, "Hey, that was the best talk here, and you should do more with this." And long story short, on the way home, flight home was like 9 hours, and I took that talk and I outlined the book, and that's how Fuck Your Feelings kind of became a book. And then I know you mentioned self-publish, and I told you I'd tell you that story. So the same guy, so he was writing a book. He got me connected to his literary agent in New York City, and that literary agent, he kind of got tricked into meeting with me. He didn't really know that was going to happen, and and he was like, "All right, I'll see what I can do." And he calls me a couple of weeks later and was like, "Look, I looked into your stuff and read the proposal, and I just happened to have a book proposal to hand him the day that we met." But he told me, "Your following isn't big enough to get the advance for a book that you want. We could probably give you $20,000, $30,000, if that. But what I would suggest is that you go on a 2-year PR tour, build a huge following, and then on the end of that, we can, talk about doing an advance for a book." And I was like, "Okay, thanks." And as soon as we hung up, I was like, "I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. Why am I going to go on a 2-year PR tour with nothing to sell? Like, if I'm going to do all that, I'm going to have my own book and I'm going to sell it." So I wrote the book, I published the book, and I did the PR tour. And I'm not going to tell you the exact number, but the book sales since it published in 2018 have far exceeded any advance that I would have gotten.
That's remarkable. I think everybody should hear that because I think a lot of people have books in them. And so just that message alone is really inspiring and empowering. And I think that's why so many people are leaning on self-publishing these days, because the 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 whole area of publishing has quite shifted because it's so much into like the marketing, and you're really doing all the marketing regardless if you're published or not. So I think it's something for people to consider,
Right.
but that's a different subject. I just think it's inspiring. That's really awesome that you were able to do that. And as I was sharing with you, as I'm reading this book and sharing it the other day, somebody in my stories said like, "Oh, I'm reading or I'm listening to the audio now." So obviously your book is getting around. So it's getting in people's hands, and I definitely want to dive into the contents of the book. But I know you did bring up that you were in the biohacking space. And I think a lot of the things you share in this book are somewhat, if you want to say, biohacking in some regard.
Mhm.
And so, as I mentioned, I went to the biohacking summit. A lot of my listeners probably know. And then I'm also, by the time this releases, uh, I would have gone to the biohacking conference in Los Angeles as well. And so for those that don't know really what biohacking is and why it is this area that is something to consider, because I know a lot that you share in the book is based on certain principles of biohacking. So what can you explain kind of briefly what it is and why is it so beneficial for people to kind of put it into their schedule, certain aspects of biohacking, and just your opinion on that?
Sure. So I always joked when biohacking became a buzzword. I don't know, somewhere around 2010 to 12, that I had been biohacking since before it was a thing, and that dates back to kind of my interest in bodybuilding. And if you had been around bodybuilders or space, you kind of get what I'm saying. Those are folks that, myself included, have learned that by manipulating certain stimulus, whether that's the way that you lift weights, the way that you eat, sleep, whatever, that you can, you can manipulate those inputs to get an output that you prefer. You can change the way you look, you can change the way you feel, you can change the way you perform. You can increase muscle mass, you can decrease body fat. So that's why I say I've been biohacking since before it was a word. And so really the word is just, it's kind of a play on hacking, as in like computer hacking. And so instead of hacking a computer system, we're hacking the biological systems. And so in order to hack any system, we have to understand, as I said earlier, those governing dynamics. And so the more you understand the governing dynamics of a system, the more you have ownership of information. And that ownership of information is what's really key. I think there's a quote from Picasso, something like, learn how to learn the rules and then learn how to break them, or something like that. And it's kind of the same thing where when I talk, I always ask people, raise your hand if you would consider yourself a chef, and not a lot of people do. And then, raise your hand if you would consider yourself a cook. And now like 2/3 of the room has raised their hand. So the third of the room that hasn't raised their hand, I just start messing with them. I'm like, you guys are adults. How do you feed yourselves?
Right.
And so, they're always like, oh, DoorDash or whatever. But my point is, and then I start to challenge people. Why do you think you're a cook? Why are you not a chef? Why are you? And what it comes down to is that phrase that I just used, and that is ownership of information. So a chef is somebody who can create a finished product either without a recipe at all, or they can use a recipe as a jumping off point and then deviate from it in any way that they want, because they have ownership of the information. They know, hey, if I'm going to cook this chicken breast, it's got to get to 160 degrees or 180 degrees or whatever. And bread has to do this, this, and this to get to whatever the finished product is. So I talk with my hands way too much, and
That's okay.
this cord is dangerous.
That's okay.
So, it's funny. You mentioned a lot of the things that are in the book are, you could classify them as biohacks. And, as I said, when I wrote that book, I was kind of coming out of a lot of time in that biohacking space. I was very careful not to use that word biohack or biohacking anywhere in the book, because I wanted the book to be something that could transcend that space. I didn't want it to get pigeonholed as, oh, this is just a biohacking book. And I'm really glad that I did that, because I think the way that it was positioned allowed it to, have success and get into a lot of different areas. And, that doesn't mean that what's in the book or that something considered a biohack isn't effective. It was me understanding from a marketing standpoint that once something gets labeled a biohack, it can be a death sentence almost, because
I
there are a
think
lot
you're
of
right.
people
Yeah.
outside of that space who, as soon as they hear that word, they're like, oh, I'm not listening to that. Or because there's a connotation that folks who are biohackers are looking for shortcuts. And I think in some instances that is true, but I think for a lot of people that is also not the case. And so for me, it's about optimization. It's about, the desire to turn over every stone possible to find any little advantage. Whether that's in mental performance, physical performance, improving relationships, whatever it is. So I guess that's my soapbox on biohacking.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't even think of that, but I think you made a really good point that I think some people think like biohacking, they put it in this box that, oh, it's it's kind of out there, it's not proven, this, that, and the other, which is not necessarily true. If anything, it has been proven success. But I think you're right that if this does transcend, this is like proof, like all the things you share in this book are proven techniques, practices, or rituals that actually help your performance, your mindset, your body, your health, your well-being, like all these things. So I think that is smart, and I never thought about that. So that's really wise, honestly. But in regards to your book, so before we go deep into your book, I do want to hear There's one statement that really stood out, and I know it's kind of what everything is centered around, is the fact that 95% of our actions are driven by our feelings. And I know uh, that's pretty much what you center the book around. And so if you could kind of go into why was the title, and not the title in itself, like why did you pick fuck your feelings? It's more like, what does this title mean to you? And why was this the significant message of the book?
It's funny. A friend of mine sent me I guess it was a reel or a story, something on Instagram yesterday. Jocko Willink was in an
Okay.
interview with somebody, and he basically said, like, hey, if you only do things when you feel like it, you're never going to accomplish the thing that you want to accomplish.
Exactly.
And they tagged my buddy, tagged me, and then hashtag fuck your feelings and sent it to me, and I reposted it. And one of my other buddies was like, how many times have we had this conversation? And I was like, yeah, we say it all the time. And then he says it and it goes viral. But that message is what fuck your feelings means to me. And that's, if that's the only thing that somebody takes away from the book, that's what I would want it to be, is to understand. So Antonio Damasio was the neuroscientist who discovered that 95% of our decisions are made based on how we feel in that moment. And I always tell people, don't get hung up on 95%. Maybe his math or data is wrong. Maybe it's 93%. Maybe it's 90. Maybe it's as low as 80%. I don't care. The point is, an overwhelming majority of our decisions on a daily basis are made based on how we feel in that instant. And if we take that a step further, so neuroscience defines feelings as a mental experience of a physiological state. And I remember a few minutes ago, I told you that, when I started trying to write this book, the question that is keeping me up at night, and the thing that I'm waking up in the morning trying to figure out, is why are some people successful and other people aren't, right? Why can you look at a guy like Jocko Willink, or why can you look at, any athlete, or, pick whoever you think is the avatar of success, right? Why is that person able to achieve the things that they're doing, and either you, or somebody, somebody that you would classify as not successful or not a high performer, what's the gap, right? What's the difference? And the difference is, it's how they spend their time, it's their habits, it's all the other things that we talk about in the book. And we even outline, I'm never one to, I don't like to just say, like, this is what's going on. I always want to give action steps, and lay out the process to close that gap. And so that's all in the book. But really, if there's just one thing you take away, it's, look, if you're always making a decision based on this fleeting, and again, if we go back to what feelings are, it's a transient, short-term way of being. It's a state, right? It's not a trait. It's not a characteristic of who we are, right? And so if we can then learn how to define our values, define who we are, when I speak, I always am amazed how many people know the core values for the company that we're, they're working for, I'm speaking to. And then I ask, well, what are your core values as an individual? And most people have never outlined that. They've never thought about that. And so if you haven't, then the next part of this equation becomes almost impossible, right? And that is that we want to, instead of making decisions based on those fleeting feelings, we want to make decisions that are aligned with our goals and our values. And there's another statistic in the book. I think it's been a while. I don't remember exactly what it is, but I think it was only 6% of people write down, write down, and achieve their goals. And I think it was like 30% of 20%. And that's how you get to the 6%. But like only 20% set goals and only 30% achieve them, or maybe those are vice versa. But it's 6% set and achieve. And again, that's just mind-boggling to me. And I want to know why. And it really comes down to, you think about, oh, I want to be a Navy SEAL. Oh, I want to be an Olympic athlete. Oh, I want to be, the owner of $1 billion business. Well, the bigger the goal, the longer the timeline, the more micro decisions we have to make along the way, which means more opportunities for feelings to lead us astray. So think about if you're sailing on a boat from London to New York City, the whole midpoint of that journey, you don't have any bearings. You don't have a sense of direction. You just have to know like which way, like if you're going west, you need some kind of compass point that keeps you going west. Otherwise, if you wake up every single new day and you're like, oh, well, I feel like going over here today. And I feel like doing this today. And I feel like this, like you're never going to wind up at your
Mm-mm.
destination. And that's the thing that's what Jocko was saying in that post from yesterday. That's what this book is all about. That's what every high performer knows. Take an Olympic athlete again. The Olympics occur every 4 years. If you're lucky, you get to compete in multiple games. Nobody says, hey, next year I'm going to be in the Olympics, right? It's a 8, 10, 12-year, sometimes longer cycle to train and become an Olympic athlete. So you're looking at 8 to 20, maybe 30 years of get before do this out. I have to do my recovery. I have to eat a certain way. I've got to do all these little things. I've got to go to this interview. I've got to say the right thing. I've got to keep the sponsors happy. I can't go to this party because paparazzi is going to be there, and I can't get my picture taken doing things that I'm not supposed to do. All of those little decisions. It's learning how to do what you're supposed to do, not what you feel like doing. And that's really challenging.
Yeah. So I think I'm like shaking my head. Yes, 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 because it's something that really needs to drill home that I think all of us are not immune to the feelings, emotions we have of everyday life. And actually, funny enough, just a couple days ago, I won't say the people involved, but we were encouraging people to do a workout with us or whatnot. And one person, and they planned like, okay, I'll meet you at 7:30 in the morning to do yoga, whatever. And there was two people involved. One person literally went to sleep at 3 a.m., woke up and he wanted to like say, I'm not going to make it because I'm so tired. I don't want to go. But he's like, but I committed to it. So he came and he met. His sister was like, I'm so tired. No, I'm not going to go. You guys go. But she committed, right? They both committed. And so that's a good example. It's like one was like, okay, I know I'm really tired, but I committed to it. And if I want to do it again, commit the next time, and that person could hold me accountable and rely on me, I need to show up. And also I'm showing up for myself. And of course, when he was done with the workout, he's like, that was the best decision ever. I want to do this every day, And that's just a good example of like those feelings. They both had similar feelings. They were both so tired, but one of them made the decision to stick with the goal, see the vision, and stay committed, accountable, and also accountable in their own word to themselves. The other person's like, but I'm feeling so tired. So that's such a good example of how we need to manage our feelings and see the end result that we want to achieve. And so how could we make better decisions in those moments? Like what would you, besides knowing our values, which I think is an exercise that everybody needs to do, as you mentioned, a lot of people don't even know what they value. But besides that, how can somebody start to be more mindful and aware of their feelings in that present moment and then override them?
So that's a great question. I want to go back though for just a second, and maybe this can be part of that answer too. Is it's kind of a total cost accounting scenario, and what I want to do is I want to look at the downstream impacts of that decision made by those two individuals, and they were brother and sister. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So the brother, the guy that shows up for the workout, and then the sister didn't. And you talk about showing up for yourself, right? And that was such a really important point because a lot of the work that I end up doing with one-on-one people, and in smaller group settings is around confidence and trust. And in an organizational setting, it's more about trusting your team, trusting your people around you. In a one-on-one setting, the word becomes confidence. But what's interesting to me is that these two, they're basically the same thing. So self-confidence is really our ability to trust ourselves. And so if I ask you, Erica, what do I need to do? Ryan, what does Ryan need to do to earn your trust? How do I demonstrate to you that Erica can trust Ryan? And your answer is probably going to be something like, hey, follow through on the things that you say you're going to do, small things, little things. And, for example, if you tell me you're going to be there tomorrow at 5 a.m. for the workout, you show up, right?
100%.
And the way that it's interesting that, we will let ourselves down way before we will let other people down. And the more we let ourselves down, the more we let ourselves off the hook, the more we break those promises to ourselves, the more we erode that trust or confidence that we have in ourselves to show up and do what either we said we were going to do or what we know we need to do. And so, it's almost like you're going to be on one of these spirals. It's either a negative spiral down or a positive, spiral up. And I think having an awareness of that affords us choice. Right? So again, you're talking about in the moment. How do we make better choices? Well, it's the total cost accounting. Realizing, hey, it's not just about this workout. It's not just about this meal. Right? No one meal, no one workout, no one day of making cold calls as a salesman is going to make or break it. Right? It's every single time you get an opportunity to do the hard thing or not do the hard thing, you're conditioning yourself. And you're conditioning yourself to either do the thing or give in to feelings. And it really is, I'm not going to say muscle memory because that's like nails on the chalkboard to me. It's actually neurological wiring. Muscles do not have the capacity for memory. It's neurological wiring. So a free throw, a golf swing, that's a physiological demonstration of neurological wiring, but our habits, our behavior patterns are the same thing. That's neurological wiring. And so if we think about it the same way we would think about, hey, perfecting a golf swing, then it's basically the same principle in action. How do I make this a habit? How do I make this just my default? If I say I'm going to do something, I do it. If I'm faced with a tough decision, I do the thing, whether it's, again, work related, relationship related, health and wellness, financial, whatever your goals are. And so, again, we kind of have to take a step back. We have to define what those things are. We have to make it clear to ourselves how we want to move through the world. And then every single decision is an opportunity to either do that or not do it.
And really, it's like, if you want a result, you can't expect to obtain it if you're not doing the steps to get there. So every no or the next thing you don't show up for, you're literally sabotaging the possibility of obtaining that result. And it's time to get radically honest with yourself and take ownership of your life. And if you literally, like, for example, if your goal is to lose weight, if you're feeling just not good in your body, you have to take certain steps every single day until you obtain that goal, and then also surpass it. It's not just like, oh, I arrived and now I don't have to do the work anymore. It's like you need to continue. And that's what I feel. And I'm sure you relate to this. I've worked out, gosh, I think since I was 15 years old. It's a part of me. It's my lifestyle. It's not like I work out. It's like, this is who I am. This is my lifestyle. I eat healthy because it's part of me. It's who I am.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really what it needs to become, is like, yes, some things might suck the first time, and especially, when you're getting into something new, it's going to suck, but eventually it will become a part of you. It will get ingrained in your psychology. And also it's a natural rhythm of your life because you made it that way. I firmly believe that. So I think some of the things that you share in the book is really making this habit of choosing to do, one of the things you talk about is choosing to do hard things, like actually, like, be intentional every week, like do something hard, like literally step into something uncomfortable to challenge yourself. So actually, let's just go into that, because I love that statement. I could go on a rant about all this stuff, but I love this statement because this is my jam as well. I
Yeah.
love this. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I say yes to hard things because I
Mhm.
personally love growth. I somewhat love uncertainty, so it challenges me, and I really think that we do need to become comfortable being uncomfortable. So if you could kind of ride that wave with me and talk about this and why it's so important to challenge ourselves in these ways so that we can obtain our goals and become a more high performing human.
Yeah. So I think, just to tie it into like training, and when I say training, that doesn't necessarily have to mean going to the gym and lifting weights. It's training for whatever the thing is that you train for, right? Special forces guys train up for deployment. If you are a Tour de France cyclist, you train for, the however long the race is, right? And so when I look at training, and when most high performers look at training, we want training to be more difficult than the real thing, right?
Mm,
If you show up to the real thing and it's harder, so right now most of my training is around hunting out west, backpack hunting with a bow in the Rocky Mountains. So if I show up out there and I have to do more miles and more elevation than what I've done in training, I'm going to get my ass kicked. If the Navy SEALs are training, in daylight and talking to each other in super loud voices and basically not being clandestine at all. And then when they go on an operation, they're in the dark and they can't speak to each other. They're going to be unprepared, right? So
yeah.
I think that paints the picture, but training has to be more difficult than the real thing. Otherwise, it doesn't adequately prepare us, right? So, as an athlete, as a performer, I'm always trying to figure out how I can make myself more prepared for the real thing. And so, if we kind of lay that over top of what we're talking about here with doing the hard things, number one, just adopting that mindset gets you there, right? But with doing the hard things, you know, think about, well, what are those hard things? Is it, the alarm going off at 5 in the morning and going and doing a workout? Maybe for you and me, not necessarily, because fitness has been a part of our life for so long, right? But for other people, that might be an extremely challenging thing to follow through with. So for anybody, there are going to be those things that are hard, whether it's again like cold calling or whatever. And so for me, the training ourselves to do hard things is okay. If you can identify what the hard things are that you have to do, what does that look like in terms of performance? Now, when we train for it, just find something that's harder and voluntarily go and do it.
Mhm.
And so for me, the way that I like to do that the most is cold exposure, ice
Right.
water. There are very few things that are more uncomfortable and more I mean, even for me, as much as I do it, as many times as I've done it, um, I still get. I don't want to say anxiety, but I mean, I can feel my physiology change. I can feel my mind kind of go to that place of like, oh, I know this is going to be cold. It doesn't matter how many times I do it; it's still really freaking cold.
Yeah.
And if my mind isn't right, if I'm not in the right headspace and not doing what I'm supposed to do to control it, then I'm going to freak out and I'm not going to have the experience that I want. And so if we can voluntarily subject ourselves to those things, then cold is a perfect example because if you start your day with that or a cold shower, there's very few things that you're going to encounter the rest of the day that are that miserable. And you did this on your own, volition. Like you showed up and you did it. So what are you going to face that was harder than that? So you have that win in your back pocket, and hey, I didn't chicken out. I showed up. I did the thing. I'm ready to take on whatever comes my way. And so I just think it goes back to that kind of that training mindset of training should be harder than the real thing. And so how can I prepare myself? How can I be ready for whatever?
I love that. And I think that's a good point that everybody's heart is going to be a little bit different. And I think cold exposure is a really good thing because it's such a simple thing to create a win. Like it's, cold exposure, you could be 1 to 3 minutes. And yes, many people that do cold exposure still think it sucks every time. But the feeling you get after, you're like, wow, I'm invigorated. I feel empowered. Like you literally feel like you just accomplished something. And so it's an instant like, yay, win. So I think that's great. One of the things I love that I could pull out of the book, you talk about awareness creates choice. And I think this is really important because I think awareness is the foundation of any change in your life. And so for anybody that is trying to obtain something, we first need to create awareness, like where am I at right now? What's uncomfortable? What do I want to change? And then once we have that awareness, we then have the choice to make a better outcome. And so when it comes to feelings and emotions, that is very much what drives our actions. So
Mhm.
if you could kind of talk about this awareness creates choice and how we could really create more awareness in our life. Again, like talking to the person that feels, not quite a seasoned high performer and somebody that chooses to do hard things. If you're talking to that person that wants to accomplish big things and they feel just overbeared by their emotions and the feelings of feeling stuck
Yeah.
and overwhelmed or maybe like lack of confidence.
So I think there's a time, tools in a toolbox, right? Everything has a time and a use, and part of awareness is it requires awareness to know when to use the right tools, right? What's the right tool for the job? So that's awareness in itself. But I think where I was going to go with this is sometimes that negativity, sometimes that pain can be used for good, right? We can harness that or bottle that and call upon it when we are in that moment of so for example, I'm at the bottom of a hill and bottom of a mountain, and I know I have to get to the top of the mountain, and maybe I don't want to do it, but I know how painful it was to fly home last year without filling a tag, and the pain of regret, the pain of not letting it out of me, not doing all that I could, knowing that I could have done more. That pain, if we can bottle it and harness it in the moment, that pain is way worse than any burning in my lungs or legs, from actually going up the mountain, right? That physical pain of charging up the mountain will be gone in a day or two, right? But that psychological pain of knowing that I didn't give it my all, knowing that I didn't do, everything in my power, like I've got to live with that for the rest of my life. And so I think there's a way that we can tap into that and harness that and use that to fuel us in those moments. And again, when we're in those moments, that's the moment of awareness, having an awareness of, hey, this is a moment of choice. Am I going to continue on this path that I've been on, or am I going to go a different route and take a step back? I think some of the best advice I've ever been given was the phrase, "Your life is perfectly designed for the results that you are currently getting." All right,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
if I'm talking to that person, that you kind of paint the picture of in this example, like somebody that you want more out of your life, you haven't quite hit where you're capable of hitting. Okay, well, the results that you're getting right now are because of the way your life is designed. It's the choices that you're making, it's how you're spending your time, it's what you do on a daily basis. And if you want different results, then I would make a list of the things that make a list of the results that you're getting that you want to keep getting. Make a list of the results that you're not getting, or the ones that you are getting that you don't want to get anymore. And right away, you're going to start to see the behaviors and the habits that need to change. And then you've created the moment of awareness right now when you're looking at these things on a piece of
Hmm.
paper. We're like, okay, well, am I going to continue to watch TV for 4 hours every single day? Or, so I'll finish that thought. because you've read the book, if somebody hasn't read the book, when I was given that piece of advice, I was watching college football, 2 games on a Saturday and then 2 NFL games on a Sunday. And let's say that those games are what, 3 hours a piece. That's 6 hours on Saturday, 6 hours on Sunday. Yeah, that's 12 hours on every single weekend. And here's this is the phrase that really gets me is that's 12 hours every weekend that I'm watching someone else live their dream instead
Wow.
of making mine a reality. Right. So, and that's another really important thing to think about. Like if you're always watching YouTube, if you're always scrolling on Instagram or Twitter, and it's not to say that we can't learn things from those platforms. There's a lot of great information on those platforms, but are you spending time watching someone else live their dream that you could be using to make your side hustle a viable career, or make whatever dream a reality that you have? And so um, yeah, I mean, that's, to me, that's, it's starting to think through those things. And then when you have that kind of aha moment, realizing that aha moment, that is the moment of awareness. And if you're asking for ways that we can kind of start to develop that and hone that more, it's really kind of developing this witness or almost third party, like objective view of ourselves. Think of like an airplane view. If you're in an airplane and you look down, the world looks different than when you're like on the ground and in it. So, starting to try to see how we move through the world from that objective view. Are we making choices that our future self would be proud of? So, if you're, one way would be to physically give yourself a different perspective, and then another way would be to change on the timeline, like chronologically, a different perspective of the choices that are in front of us at any given time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes into the whole message of self leadership is, are you leading? Because really, again, it comes back to, and I know Jocko shares this message, extreme ownership. And it's so critical to take that responsibility for our lives. Like, really, if I always say this saying, if it's going to be, it's up to me. End of story. So that self leadership is so important because um, if you want any success in your life, hopefully it's not handed to you, to be honest. So I really believe it's implementing these certain behaviors and habits and asking I love that you say, like, take this, you know, pull it back, bird's eye view, and really assess your life and be real radically honest about it. If you want to say, and it's funny, I was having this conversation the other day, how David Goggins, he's like, calls it as it is. He's like, I used to call myself fat. You're fat. Like, just call it as it is. And it's kind of harsh. Like, but when you're so honest about, I mean, you could maybe be kinder and just say, like, I'm extremely overweight. I need to lose weight because I care about my health. That's probably a better way to put it. But like, I mean, it's just being honest with yourself so that possibly that feeling of not being comfortable where you're at will at least help put that fire under your ass to make a change. And I think that, as you're talking about the states and the traits, I think that's really important because, you know, it's really developing these habits, these traits, these rituals, implementing into your life to drive you forward. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, a lot of people don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. if they're still tired, but because you've made that a trait and a habit in your life, you do it anyways. It's just, again, it becomes a part of you. So I mean, there's so much goodness you share in regards to that. What would you say as far as being a high performer? What would you say are some traits that are really the standout traits of a high performer? Because I want people to really understand, like, hey, I want to show up for myself. I want to be like a I love that you say become a more significant human. That's on the cover of your book. Like, I want to be just a person that is doing my best, feeling my best, and just accomplishing the best I could possibly be in this one lifetime. So, what do you feel is like the traits that those high performers embody?
So I'm going to give you two really short, easy answers for that. If you're looking for a trait, it's commitment. Um, and then I'm reluctant to say other traits because I think when we, if I listed a bunch of either values or traits that high performers share, I think that has a tendency to put high performance outside of us, meaning that like, oh, if only I was more this, then I could be a high performer, right? So I'll take what you said there of how did can you phrase it again? That you said like I want to be more committed. I want to be a more significant human. I want to be a person that shows
Yeah.
up, right? So you take all those things you just said, right, and then at the end of that, I ask you, what is preventing you from being that right now? Or who is stopping you from being that right now? Nobody. Or the other answer is you. So,
Yes.
so it's as simple as just saying act accordingly, right? And that's why the define your values is such an important and powerful exercise, because I don't know what your values are, but when you figure those out for yourself, they're much more powerful because it's an intrinsic factor as opposed to an extrinsic thing. And there's a whole other conversation about toxic goals and competing, comparing, copying others. That will never last, will burn out, whatever. But if you identify what those things are that you want to be, the things that you want to leave your mark on, how you want to be remembered, how you want other people to talk about you, the way you want to move through the world and live this life. Once you figure those things out, I mean, even just saying those questions or listening to those questions, you probably have things pop into your head. Write down your answers and then act accordingly. Nobody or nothing is stopping you from being that version of you right now. And then it's just, hey, check in with that every single morning. I have people when we do this exercise, then it's just take out your phone, put an alert on your phone or a reminder that pops up every single day and just reminds you or asks you that question. Hey, are you being that guy? Are you being that woman? Are you being that mom, dad, whatever? And when you're reminded and you see that every single day, it's just all you have to do is that's the awareness, right? You get a reminder, aware, and then choice. Like, am I going to be that? Or am I going to let my fleeting feelings today lead me away from being this person that I want to be? And just because you decide that, doesn't mean that you never have hard days. It doesn't mean that don't have moments within each day where your feelings are, a little bit more overwhelming. But, and again, I think one of the misconceptions with the book is that I'm poo-pooing feelings or saying that they don't have their
No.
value or their place. And that couldn't be further from the truth,
Mm.
but it's just understanding what drives our decisions. And if we want to be successful, then we need to understand how to be better decision makers and how to be better CEOs of ourselves.
So well said. So well said, Ryan. And I think you make it really simplistic, to be honest. You like really tell it as it is. And that's really what it is like aligning with like if you want to become this person, okay, there's only two things stopping you. You or you. So, I mean, really, it's like, I mean, some people like obviously
Yeah.
are in harder situations and they're not capable to easily obtain a certain success, if you want to say there is that, right?
Right.
But we've seen people really overcome like the greatest
Mhm.
challenges. And if anything, that
Mhm.
is your proof. And so I think really you make it very simple is that, if to check in with ourselves and, if we desire to be a certain person or accomplish a certain goal, it's like to check in with ourselves, like, am I doing the things that would even bring me there? Like, I always like to think about, and this was very much my journey is okay, if I want to attract this partner, let's say, this is just one example, and I want these values in my partner, okay, am I being the person that has those values? Because if I want to attract that, I got to be in alignment with that. So I think that's one of the things to think about. So really comes down to that simple little things that you're sharing. Really, it's really
Mhm.
awesome. I love it. I love everything you're sharing and it's so valuable. So,
Well, and just to go back, because I know you asked, for some traits, and I'm not trying to, dodge that question. I want people to realize that it's you. It's not some, high performance or success is not this mystical thing that's out of our reach. It's really about doing mundane things with remarkable consistency.
ooh, good.
Can you just show up and be relentless and do it? The quote is, remarkable people do unremarkable things with remarkable consistency. Right. And so, to the word that I threw out when you asked the question originally is commitment. Right? And so high performers, successful people, the ones who are most committed to their goals, their values, to being that person that shows up in all the ways that you phrased it, so eloquently earlier. And so I think, and like you just said, like when somebody overcomes a lot to achieve whatever the thing is, like it's commitment, right? That's what got them through the adversity. If you don't have any commitment, then the first time adversity shows up, I mean, see ya, right? So, are you committed to yourself? Are you committed to your values? And the stronger that commitment is, and that's why when we look through some of these kind of scaffoldings that we're trying to build, like the values, if it's intrinsic, then that increases the commitment, right? As opposed to it being an extrinsic factor. So,
Mm.
yeah, so commitment would be the thing. Just, are you committed to that?
Perfect. Yeah. I think that's a great thing to check in with always. That's perfect. Uh I just have one more question and then we'll kind of wrap it up. But as far as procrastination goes, because I know that's a thing a lot of people, it's easy to get into procrastination. And of course, we have all these notifications and all these distractions surrounding us. It's so easy to swipe, right?
Yep.
Um, not like literally right, but just swipe. We're not doing the Bumble thing. But anyways, so how can we really like avoid this procrastination? Why do people even fall into procrastination so often?
Humans like the path of least resistance, right? It's human nature to do that. I read something from Mark Cuban years ago. He was investing in, I think it was like HD Net or some TV thing, and he shared the story that somebody told him that was stupid, that TV was going to go away, and he's like, no, TV is never going to go away, because if you look at human behavior, it is harder to sit on the couch and not turn the TV on than it is to sit on the couch and just mindlessly channel surf. Right? Like, and test this. Like, if you have a TV, the next time you want to go sit down and turn it on, sit down on the couch and do not touch your phone, do not touch your iPad, do not touch your TV. Just sit on the couch and sit there. I promise you're not going to sit there for more than 5 minutes. Either you're going to take a nap because you need sleep, or you're going to get up and go do something. Um, and that, I think, just kind of speaks to this path of least resistance. And so it's very easy for us to fall into behaviors, and then they become patterns where we are expending the least amount of either physical or mental energy. And you mentioned a lot of the attention attention grabbing things that are on our phones and devices now. And I mean, that's the other side of this, is you have to, again, awareness is such a powerful thing, right? Having an awareness that all of these apps on our phones, all of these platforms make money when you're on the platform.
Hmm.
You are the product. If you're not paying for it, then you are the product. So if it's Instagram or YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, they don't make money if you're not on that platform using the app. So it's in their best interest to hold your attention and keep you there. And again, that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, are you happy with the way you're spending your time? Are you happy spending X number of minutes or hours a day, doing whatever? And the procrastination thing, like I said, why? Okay, so we kind of covered that. It's human nature to fall into the path of least resistance. And so then having an awareness of that, and just understanding, hey, the things that I'm doing instead are less challenging they're less demanding on mental and physical resources. They're less scary. And if we go back to earlier in the conversation, if we've trained ourselves to make the hard choice, to do the hard thing, then we're a lot more likely in those moments to say, yeah, I know it would be a lot easier to scroll on Instagram, but I need to design this post and get it out, or I need to, make this call. I need to, turn off all notifications, put my phone on airplane mode, and write this chapter in my book, or even just start writing. Another great piece of advice I got was, when somebody has writer's block, um, really there's no such thing as writer's block because nobody has speaker's block, right? If somebody puts a mic in front of you or asks you a question, you'll just talk forever. So if you're having a hard time writing, just press record on a voice note or a dictation and then just start speaking. So just looking for those little ways to, how do I get over the hump? How do I build some inertia? And then you just keep that momentum going.
I love it. I love it. So I definitely, I want to wrap this up because I want to honor your time. But one thing I think that leaving this episode, I mean, I feel more inspired and motivated to get my ass in gear. So I hope everybody listening feels the same. And first of all, I'm definitely going to say, get this book, y'all. Fuck Your Feelings. Grab it on Amazon. I'll plug it in the show notes. And also, I think it's great to give a little takeaway of an action people could take after listening to this. Like, do something hard, like choose what is your hard and kind of start to implement that into your life. And also ask yourself, what do you value? I think these are things that to take away from this episode, to put that into action and start answering those questions and, put one foot in front of the other and just get moving. So anyways, where can people best find you, first of all?
Yeah. So the website is ryanmunsey.com. That's sort of the hub for everything. I am on Instagram. It's at Ryan Munsey _. Not on Twitter anymore. Not on Facebook anymore. Podcast is coming back. Better Human
Awesome.
Project. I've neglected that. I think we put out 5 episodes last year, but I'm committed to bringing that back. So there will be more of those episodes.
Awesome. Okay. So I know you shared so much wisdom, but I have to close off in asking my question that I ask all guests, which is really important. So if you were to take all your wisdom you've learned, your life lessons that you've learned, and you were to part onto us one thing that you feel anybody needs to hear right now, what would that lesson and wisdom be?
That's tough. Um, I think, for me, I shared it earlier that most powerful advice that I was ever given is, your life is perfectly designed for the results that you are currently getting. And, we talked about it a couple of times. All progress starts with the truth. And so if you can honestly and objectively, kind of meditate on that and think about that phrase, I think that we can all get some insight into, why we are where we are, why we are how we are. And, again, with the awareness that we've talked about, now we have a moment of inflection, a decision to make. And that is, what do I want to change? And, then you just start chopping, plugging away. And there's another one in the book that we didn't talk about, but if you read the book, you'll learn move the chains and just keep moving the chains.
Awesome. So, so good. Ryan, this has been such an honor. Thank you so much for all the wisdom you shared today and just the impact you continue to make. And I know you're making a big impact in those lives you touch. So thank you for all the work you're doing today. Appreciate you.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you, Eric.
So welcome.